I am a 2500 rated chess.com blitz player with a rapid rating of 2400. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the most important steps that I took to surpass each rating level. Every rating goal has been given a range because I have used graph analysis of all of my different plateaus and found that each skill level has a rating range that you'll probably fluctuate around depending on how well you're performing on a particular day. But once you can perform consistently in a certain level, then these ranges will be around where your baseline is. If you just want to visit your current range to take a look at the steps you need to climb the rating ladder, then there are timestamps in the description. But I would recommend that you watch the whole video because you might find out that you're missing fundamental knowledge from previous skill levels which will now be holding you back. I started playing chess at age 13 5 years ago with a rating of 600. I knew how the pieces moved and scholars mate, but not much else apart from that. If you're completely new to chess, around 100 to 600 ELO, then I would recommend familiarizing yourself with why the pieces have their values, derived from the number of squares that they control, along with the pros and cons of each piece. From there, all you really have to do is play a lot of 10-minute rapid games to familiarize yourself with how the pieces move, try and improve your board vision and square control, follow the point system, take free stuff, and try not to hang your own. For example, this was the first game of chess that I ever played, and I played the move queen to h6. This is a big mistake because I wasn't looking out for my opponent's moves, particularly the checks, where I immediately blundered my queen with bishop to g5 check played by my opponent, which won them the queen and eventually won them the game. The easiest way for you to see where you've gone wrong is to do one of these chess.com game reviews, where you can just do a quick blunder check, see why you made the mistakes. As you can see here, queen to h6, given a mistake by the chess.com engine, really should be a blunder double question mark. But if you don't want to pay for chess.com premium, then you can also do this for free. I'm going to show you how. You just have to go to the self-analysis, go down to this bottom right here, click share, copy the PGN over. So let's just copy that to the clipboard, go over to leetchess.org, go to learn, open the study, go to my studies, click this green button over here, just start study, create a new study, doesn't matter what the name is, let's just click start. Chapter 1 also doesn't matter. If you want, you can be more organized, but then what you have to do is go to the PGN, paste in the PGN that we just copied, create the chapter, click this button down here which says computer analysis, request the computer analysis, wait for that to load, and you'll be able to see here that just like in chess.com, we've got the 4 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 1 blunder that you can take a look at. We can take a look at the big blunder. Queen to h6 is considered a blunder by the Leet Chess engine, of course, because it gives up a queen. But the main question that you want to be asking at this rating is, how am I going to stop making these blunders? And the way that I would do that is by looking at each specific case and trying to take away one thing that will prevent you from making the same mistake again and again. In this case, it was not looking out for checks from my opponent on the next move. If I were to take a look at my king's position and knowing how the bishop moves, I should be able to see that the move bishop to g5 check is an option. Which means in future, I would move my queen to a safer square, like queen to f3 for example, where it doesn't walk into this dangerous fork. For your own blunders, this could be something like a counting error in terms of captures, or simply missing the squares controlled by the enemy pieces and hanging a full piece. If you find yourself making the same mistakes over and over again, then what you want to do is write that mistake down on a piece of paper or type it up, whatever you want, but then have it next to you while you're playing your game as a reminder not to make that specific mistake. Chess improvement is not a sprint, it will take a long time, and if you can incrementally improve yourself after every single game, then you'll be doing better than everyone else. If you stay consistent, play 1 to 3 rapid games per day and analyze them like I've just shown you, then I guarantee that you will reach 600 in no time at all. Now, on to 600 to 1000. 600 is where I started out, and I quickly improved to 900 in just a matter of weeks. But after that, I stagnated at 900 for almost 3 months. Now, why is that? Well, it's mostly because I didn't play very often and I was quite lazy with my game analysis. But one thing that I did do very well is play my 5 free puzzles every single day and get that pattern recognition practice in. But most importantly, what I was doing is after every single puzzle that I got wrong, I would try to understand why exactly I got it wrong. Always make sure to check the solution and try to understand why it works. Most of the time early on, this just involved looking for the forcing moves, which is a really useful skill to train. It was also at this moment that I started looking at YouTube content for learning basic principles like castling as soon as possible, putting pawns in the center, knight before bishop, and all of these other basic rules that you should learn as you're just starting out in chess. All of this culminated in the game where I was paired with a 1400 and had the chance to prove myself and cross that 1000 ELO barrier as a 900. I started off by following the most principled moves by developing my knights, putting my pawns in the center here and here because that's what I'd learned to do according to the principles, and while these moves aren't objectively the best, you can see that they're still working against my much stronger opponent, who is breaking all of the rules by not developing any of their pieces and pushing all of their pawns instead. My opponent plays f3, which is bad not only because they're not developing any of their pieces, but also because it weakens this diagonal over here. I decide to capture in the center, which is actually quite a principled move because I wanted to open up the e-file and attack their king, seeing as they haven't developed any pieces. They recaptured, I played b6, another pretty reasonable move, trying to undermine the pawns here so that I can capture and develop my bishop. Not king takes c5, but bishop takes on c5. They played b4, which is actually a pretty tricky move, because if I were to capture that pawn, then queen a4 looks strong. Somehow it's not even that good though, because after knight d7, queen takes on b4, we have pawn takes on c5, pawn takes on c5, and bishop takes on c5. Black is down a piece, but winning the game mostly because of this weak diagonal, meaning that white will never castle. Black castles quickly, brings a rook to the center, and these bishops are going to be an absolute menace. I don't think either of us had any idea about that, and instead I just decided to capture. They recaptured with the b pawn. I take on c5, sacrificing the bishop without a very good reason, to be honest. I just wanted to castle my king, but definitely was undervaluing my poor bishop over here, which I just gave up for nothing. Of course, they captured it. I played queen e7 check first because, I don't know, let's give it a check. They probably should have played queen e2 here, but instead played knight e2. I went for bishop a6, which is now a blunder because of queen to a4. Fortunately for me, they missed that move and just developed the bishop. I castled the king. They played knight to d2. I brought a rook to the center, missing out on a nice chance at smothered mate, by the way. Now when they spot queen to a4, it's actually not a very good move because I just capture on e2, and even though my knight is hanging here, their king is getting absolutely massacred in the center of the board. They decide to capture here. I play bishop to b5, seeing the discovered check. All of those puzzles and tactics training are paying off, and I shortly win the game after collecting the queen. So now you can see what it takes to cross 1000. It's nothing too crazy. It mostly just involves following a couple basic principles, learning some tactics, playing a lot of chess, continuing your blunder analysis and trying to understand why you're making those mistakes, and you'll eventually get there. I will say I think this is probably one of the hardest stages of chess because you're just trying to get those foundational building blocks of understanding in, and your board awareness is still developing. So don't be too concerned about your blind spots, missing tactics, etc. as long as you can take away some lessons from them and actively continue to improve rather than just passively playing games, then you're going to improve and you'll be out of sub 1000 in no time. The 1000 to 1400 ELO rating range was another big plateau for me. I spent 3 months in this rating range, and at this point my chess learning consisted of just 2 things: watching YouTube trap opening videos from people like Eric Rosen and Nagamata, and solving chess puzzles like an absolute madman between every class because the COVID-19 lockdown had just begun in the UK at this point. It was this combination of just spamming puzzles and learning lots of opening traps that continued to develop my old style as just an attacking maniac, which I will say is actually very effective in online blitz and rapid. In fact, I would even recommend learning a much more attacking, aggressive, tactical style before further developing your more positional understanding for the following reason. If you learn positional chess without developing your tactics, then you will not have the pattern recognition to stop your blunders, which means that you can end up losing very nice games in just one move, even when you're outplaying your opponent in piece maneuvering and structure and all that good stuff. But when you learn tactics first, then the positional skills are much more easy to fill in. And even better is the fact that you'll be able to achieve your positional plans using tactics to get there and force them through, which is the absolute best universal style that you could hope for. This game demonstrates my pretty crazy attacking style at the time. I go for the Stafford Gambit, trying to sacrifice my e5 pawn because I've been watching Eric Rosen, and all I wanted to do was get a completely losing position out of the opening. For some reason this opponent didn't accept the pawn though. I insisted that they take it with bishop to c5, they still declined it, and eventually I said, alright, that's enough, you're not going to get the pawn. So we just continued with normal development for quite a while, and nothing too crazy happened. We did castle on opposite sides, which is something I like to do a lot, and then I would just run my pawns up the opponent and try to checkmate them. Very few of my games were reaching the endgame, which was a bit of a problem because I wasn't feeling very confident about transitioning to later stages of the game, and instead just wanted to checkmate my opponent and sacrifice material at all costs. So you can see here, I'm lunging into the position, forcing the pieces back, bringing the queen in, breaking with c5, playing c4. The bishop is now trapped. They play a3, a nice move, trying to counterattack my knight and get their bishop out of there, but I just take the bishop, and after they take my knight, I play queen to a1 check, force the knight to block, takes on c2, king takes on c2, and here, without really a second thought, I immediately sacrifice the knight in the center in just 5 seconds. The reason I do this is because I can see that my bishop wants to come out and will then be able to join the attack against the white king. Rook takes on e4, bishop to f5, they try to bring out the knight, I capture the rook in the corner, capture the rook in the center, they take back, and now they're just completely lost. They take the pawn on d6, and my next move is a very nice one, but I also think that it highlights another problem that I had, which is that I got way too fancy when it comes to converting positions, which oftentimes led to me blundering, completely winning games in an unnecessary way. In this particular case, rook f to c8 is an excellent move, because it restricts the king from running back this way, and now queen to a4 checkmate is inevitable. They took my rook, I took back, and they moved the queen somewhere, but now queen to a4 is simply a mate. And while this move, rook to c8, can look brilliant in some cases, in other cases where I don't calculate correctly, because remember, I am still only about 1500, I did have a tendency for completely choking and blowing winning games. I would still recommend this sharp playing style, however, because in the long run, it will pay dividends when you need to have your accurate conversions at the higher levels, and you're used to looking for the most aggressive and accurate way to convert your position, rather than just trading off all of the pieces and getting into some endgame. It was also at this moment where I started playing a lot more rapid chess, mostly because of a little bit of ELO anxiety, which is pretty much a state of mind where you can't play your best chess because you're worried about losing rating and falling below your goals. Increasing my rapid rating meant that I could get 2 equally rated categories, and it makes the losses in one of them hurt a lot less. At the same time, it meant that while my intuition skills were really far ahead because I'd been playing mostly blitz, it gave my calculation skills a chance to catch back up, and also the opportunity to start playing some endgames, as most blitz games rarely had the time to reach that position, or if they did have the time, then they were just mad time scrambles where no one was really thinking. Something I do disagree with most chess coaches about, however, is that bullet and blitz is bad for your chess development. All it does is train different skills like intuition, keeping calm with low time on the clock, and providing a chance for you to practice your openings, while rapid chess will train your calculation and planning skills much better. Both of these two things will combine to make you an excellent chess player overall. When looking to break free of the 1400 to 1800 ELO bracket, you might find yourself having to completely reevaluate your chess. Many people are not willing to do that, and that's how they can get stuck in this bracket for a very long time. You need to look at how you're losing most of your games, because some serious fundamentals are likely missing. If it's tactics, go back to solving more puzzles. In my case, I had severe positional misunderstanding. I didn't give any value to pawn structure, or pawn count for that matter, gambiting pawns away non-stop in the opening, and for that reason, while I would have the odd brilliancy and the odd amazing game, I'm not Paul Morphy, I'm not Adolf Anderson in the evergreen game from Agadmeta's videos, and at the end of the day, that rush of dopamine from a beautiful sacrifice, while being nice, is not going to get me to improve in the long run. Just to illustrate how glaringly obvious my mistakes were at this level and how easy they are to fix, I have 3 examples of making the exact same positional blunder. In this game I played pawn to c4, which somehow the engine evaluates as a good move. I think it's a terrible mistake, and the reason for that is that it goes right into black's hand where they want to play pawn to d5 and break free, and after I exchange the pawns, and also the knight for bishop, while this position isn't very good, the second positional blunder was the nail in the coffin, which was taking on d5. The reason is that it saddles me with this horrible backwards pawn which can never move forward and is also isolated without any friends to defend it. So that after the queen takes pawn, this pawn is essentially a goner and I went on to lose the game. Similarly, I made the same mistake in this game with pawn to f5. Now I have this terrible pawn on e6 which will simply get piled up on and I am going to lose it. There is no way to defend this one in the long run, and I also had absolutely no reason to be making such a horrible weakness. And in this game I played the horrible move, pawn to f5, which essentially saddles myself with 2 big weaknesses that I can never get rid of. My opponent completely dismantled me in this game and I I quickly fell apart. For some reason, gave up my knight here and ended up quickly losing the game and resigning. So the obvious thing here is that I had terrible glaring weaknesses. But what you will want to know is how I was able to fix them. So once again, I returned to my good friend Chess YouTube, watching videos about basic pawn structure understanding, learning the importance of pawn structure flexibility, pawn breakthroughs, the risks of overextending, and all of that good stuff when it comes to the pawns. When I played my next game, I always made a mental note to focus on the pawn structure, as well as altering my openings to be less gambit focused and much more classically sound. This process was painful, and it took over 6 months of consistent effort to completely rewire my way of thinking about chess. You can see this game I was playing white against the Sicilian, and I was very happy to see this backwards pawn from my opponent because I learnt from my own mistakes that if white can get a grip of this d5 square, then they should be doing well. The game continued with me trying to control the center square. I put a knight in the middle, played c3, and after cementing a healthy pawn structure, I eventually remaneuvered my knight over to the center square. I planted it in the middle so that now after they take, I'm able to take back with my queen, because I learnt that what you want to do with your outpost squares is not plug them with a pawn, but rather with a piece. They captured my knight, I took with the queen, they moved the king to the side, I'm not really sure why, I think they wanted to get out of the pin and play f5, and here I played b4. So we do see, of course, I hadn't learnt everything at this point, I was still only around 1800, a4 would have been a much better move trying to undermine this structure and break open my rook, but I thought that after b4, knight c4, I could play bishop to b3 and eliminate the knight. The exact trajectory of the game isn't super important from here, but what does matter is that I kept maintaining the pressure on this d6 pawn, eventually broke free. I was able to defend my weakness while black was very passive defending their weakness, and I managed to convert this game, starting with a nice tactical flair with rook takes on a6. You cannot take with the rook because there's a pin here on the queen, which as you can see, you can still be a tactical player at heart whilst including some positional plans. So after winning this pawn, everything was pretty easy. I was able to smoothly convert it with my pawn up position and simply push them through, brought in the king, brought in my rook, won some more pawns, and my opponent resigned pretty shortly, seeing as they had nothing left. So if you are at that stage of having to completely rewire all of your chess, don't get disheartened, keep at it. I experienced over 6 months of stagnation before over 300 points of improvement came in just 1 month. Your brain needs time for these concepts to sink in, and oftentimes you don't see the results of all of your hard work until many months later all at once. So if you can spot your flaws and set your mind to improving them, then I promise you will improve as a chess player. In order to keep progressing through 1800 to 2200, I did 2 critical things for my chess. The first of which being that I finally got around to learning my endgames. I highly recommend you take a look at Daniel Naroditsky's endgame playlist, which I will link in the description. I built so many good endgame foundationals from that playlist. I also believe that studying your rook endgames and king and pawn endgames are bar none one of the best ways that you can spend your chess training at this point. The reason why it's so amazing is because I was able to practice my rook endgames to the point where I was confident that I was going to win endgames even when transitioning into them down a pawn. This endgame confidence gives you huge confidence in the opening and the middle game, because as a person who was previously afraid of trades and simplifying the position away from tactical messes, I now felt like I was finally capable of winning at all stages of the game. I also worked on the other symmetrical endgames like knight versus knight, bishop versus bishop, and queen versus queen, and my win percentage for turning the tide in these dead drawn endgames was probably the single biggest difference for my rating gains at this point. The second big thing that I did here was rework my openings once again. For black, I was inspired by Daniel Naroditsky to play the Accelerated Dragon, and I also learned a really nice system in the King's Indian defense by a lesser known YouTuber called Robert Ramirez, who has so much good content on the King's Indian if you want to take a look at it. For white, I started to learn the bishop's opening, Milner-Barry gambit against the French, and the Grand Prix attack, all from the butcher himself, Mio, whilst also picking up the Tal variation of the Caro-Kann from a Gotham chess video. It's important to know, however, that all of these videos were just starting places for my opening learning, and I evolved my own repertoire adjusted for the specific moves of my opponents by analysing the games that I played every single time and iterating my openings bit by bit. If you're interested in learning more in depth about the openings that I played, then I will be releasing a full opening repertoire for both black and white on the openings that I used to reach the rating of 2500, so keep a lookout for that. I also think it's important at this point to mention that if you haven't already started playing over the board games in longer rapid or even classical time controls, then at this point it's borderline essential for further improvement. If you are one of the people that can improve further with just online blitz and bullets, then you are the exception and not the rule. The reason I think it's so crucial to do this is because over the board people fight much harder for the position, which allows you to find more resources and do much more in-depth analysis, giving you an overall deeper understanding of the game. Now, I don't know if this is a correlation or if this is direct causation, but after every single over-the-board chess tournament or even just league game that I played, I would immediately notice that my blitz scores were better than ever and I would see the board so much more clearly. Once again, I think that's because once you've considered something and analyzed it in depth, then you'll have that understanding and the moves will just come more easily. If you're unable to play over the board chess because there isn't any going on in your area or maybe it's too expensive, I understand, I find it pretty hard to get chess tournaments in as well, then the Chess Dojo has an excellent initiative for playing online classical chess, which I will leave a link to in the description. I don't think online classical chess is quite as good, but at the very least you are going to get that more in-depth understanding from the analysis. And now we have the final hurdle, the most recent rating category that I've been working through, and that is 2200 to 2500. If you're at this level, congratulations for making it this far, and also welcome to 2300 ELO hell. The 22 to 2300s are where a lot of players stop improving. I reached 2400 by just continuing to brute force the same learning strategy that I'd started at 1800, but to make that big shift to 2500, I knew I had to make some equally big shifts in the way that I was learning chess. The first thing that I did was move away from the comfortable sidelines that I was playing in game after game, which were giving me decent results, but I also think inhibiting my understanding because I wasn't seeing a broad range of positions that I could be if I was using more classical openings. So I switched from being a bishop's opening player to starting to even play the Catalan with pawn to d4. This is one big thing that I think you can do, which is that if you're stagnating in chess and you're a lifelong e4 or lifelong d4 player, then you can switch to the other one to gain some more experience in different positions, and I think that will greatly help your chess knowledge and understanding on the whole. I also took my endgame study to the next level, focusing on endgame imbalances, particularly in the case of bishop versus knight endgames. As you can see, this looks like a pretty level position, but I have the bishop for the knight and I was feeling pretty good about trying to win this. The reason is because the bishop can zip all the way around the board while the knights can be a little bit clumsy. I started off by remaneuvering my knight around, played pawn to f3 because now I want to play knight to f2, knight to h3, knight to f4, or knight to g5, but my opponent immediately made that plan even better by playing the move pawn to f5. This is given a good move by the engine, but with a bit more understanding you'll see that this is completely unnecessary and a borderline game-ending mistake. I continued with knight to f2, they dropped the knight back, I played knight to h3, knight to f6, and there was no way to stop the knight from going into f4, now attacking these pawns, which were weakened by pushing pawn to f5. If you remember, this was one of the big mistakes that I myself was making back when I was around 1600. Of course, I'm not saying my opponent's playing at that level, but you can see that by making the mistakes yourself, then it will help you to understand why they're wrong when other people do the same thing. So in this position, they tried to lash out, I simply grabbed the pawn, traded off, brought the knight back, exchanged one more pawn, dropped the bishop back, guarded my own pawn. When they gave me the opportunity, I looked to trade off the knights, which would then get my bishop to attack this pawn, so they refused it, but then I just grabbed one more pawn, brought the knight back, exchanged off the ponies, pushed the knight back, pushed the pawn up, f4, traded off, took another pawn and played bishop back to f3, which was going to escort my pawn down the board, and with these two extra pawns either side of the board, the knight was completely overwhelmed and my bishop dominated the day. But if I had to give credit to what I think the single most important thing for my chess improvement at this point was, I would have to say that it's on the psychological side. And funnily enough, it came from over-the-board chess again, where I was able to get experience outplaying my opponents who are trying as hard as they can in all areas of the game. This is a classical game I played almost a year ago now, which looks like a very level position. They decided to castle, I brought my bishop to e7, and everything was looking pretty normal. But I was feeling good here because their pawn structure's a little bit weaker while mine is nice and solid. I brought my knight to d6 now, looking to get in either here or maybe go here and try to win the bishop pair. They played c4, I brought my knight to f5, rook came to the center, adding more pressure to this pawn. They brought the rook to defend it, I brought another rook to the middle, which shows another thing that I'd learnt, which is keeping the tension when you can. Here I provide as many opportunities as possible for my opponent to go wrong, rather than instead taking the knight here, which while it may have been a good move, they would be able to take back with their knight, and at least I make things very clear for them. Instead, I bring the rook to the center, giving them the opportunity to make a mistake, which after exchanging the pawns, they do very quickly make a mistake, allowing me to capture the bishop, then capture the pawn, invade with my rook, exchange off the rook, push the pawn through, improve the positioning of my bishop so that it dominates the knight. They start pushing the pawn, but at this point it's pretty trivial. All I have to do is start to activate the king. I bring the king into the game, exchange off some more pieces, deliver a check, and finish the game off with a nice little tactical flair, pawn to c2, and there is no way to stop this, because if you move the king over, then I will just take the bishop, and after the king takes here, then the pawn gets through, and if you take my bishop, then once again, the pawn gets through. So playing these long games at a really high accuracy does give a great confidence booster. But another big confidence booster is how many masters that I was now playing at Blitz, and realizing that they make big mistakes too. They are humans, and I've even started to be able to outplay quite a few of them without them having to make any big blunders. So right around 2500 online rating and 2100 over the board ECF rating is where my chess journey currently is. My goals for the future are to try and play more over the board tournaments and gradually work towards that FM title. And I know that if I keep working at chess by spotting my weak points and trying to eliminate them, then it's only a matter of time before I get there. So thank you all for watching this far, and subscribe so you don't miss my opening repertoire videos that are coming out soon, as well as my journey to FIDE Master. But other than that, that's all for now, and as always, I'll see you all in another video. Bye!